I opened my eyes to the harsh glare of hospital lights, feeling an emptiness in my body that terrified me. Beside my bed, the electronic monitor beeped steadily, but the silence from my family was deafening. My mother stood there with a cold, desperate expression, begging me not to call the police. I wanted to scream, but my throat was too dry to make a single sound as the horror of the situation slowly washed over me. My name is Audrey, and just hours before this moment, I was locked inside a dark hotel storage room while in active labor. My own mother had taken my phone and trapped me there because she refused to let my medical emergency ruin the wedding of my sister. I survived the ordeal, but the fate of my newborn daughter was still completely unknown to me in that cold room. To understand how we reached this horrific point, you must understand the toxic dynamic of my family. My mother Vivian ruled our lives with absolute control, and my younger sister Serena was always her favorite child. My father Gregory simply stayed silent to keep the peace and avoid confrontation. I was always the reliable daughter who was expected to sacrifice my own needs for the happiness of everyone else. My husband Julian was the only person who saw this manipulation clearly and tried to protect me from the endless demands. On the morning of the wedding at Stonehaven Manor, I was heavily pregnant and completely exhausted from running errands for Serena. Julian begged me to sit down and rest, warning me that I was pushing my body far too hard for people who did not appreciate my efforts. I promised Julian that I would leave the venue if anything felt wrong, but my mother quickly dismissed him to the ballroom downstairs. Serena emerged in her beautiful gown, showing absolutely no concern for my visible physical struggle. She only cared that I remained present to handle the final coordination details, insisting that her special day had to remain flawless no matter what I was going through. Suddenly, a sharp pain gripped my abdomen, and a sudden warmth ran down my leg as my water broke with a terrifying streak of blood. I panicked and reached for my phone, knowing I had to contact Julian immediately. Vivian grabbed my wrist with surprising force and demanded to know what I was doing, her cold eyes scanning the stain on my dress without showing any motherly sympathy. I told her that I was in active labor and needed a hospital immediately, but she refused to allow an ambulance to ruin the arrival of the wedding guests. Serena looked ashamed but remained silent as Vivian led me down a quiet service corridor. My mother promised she would guide me to a private space and called Julian herself to avoid causing an unnecessary scene in the lobby. She opened a heavy gray door to a windowless linen storage room and told me to wait inside while she made the call. When I insisted on keeping my phone, she snatched it from my hand, claiming she needed to coordinate with Julian. Before I could protest, she stepped back into the hallway, shut the heavy door, and the electronic lock engaged with a terrible click. I rattled the handle in disbelief, screaming for her to open the door, but the sound of her fading footsteps was my only reply. Through the thick wood, she faintly called out that I needed to calm down and stop trying to steal the spotlight from Serena. I was left alone in the dark, clutching my stomach as another wave of intense pain hit my body. Meanwhile, Vivian used my passcode to unlock my phone and send deceptive text messages to Julian to keep him away. She wrote that I was resting and did not want to be disturbed during the ceremony. Julian replied with intense worry, but she ignored his urgent calls and powered down the device, hiding it away in her bag so no one could locate me. Inside the storage room, the pain grew unbearable, and I realized I was bleeding heavily on the cold floor. I pounded on the door with a metal stand, screaming for help, but the loud, muffled wedding music easily drowned out my cries. I collapsed onto my side, crying out in the dark and praying that my unborn baby would survive this absolute nightmare. Downstairs, Julian became highly suspicious of the strange text messages and left the ceremony to search the bridal suite. Vivian intercepted him and claimed I was simply resting in a quiet area, but Julian refused to believe her obvious lies. He noticed my father looking at the floor in guilt, which confirmed his suspicion that my family was hiding something truly terrible. Julian bypassed my family and found the resort manager, Vanessa, who immediately checked the security cameras to locate my whereabouts. The footage showed Vivian leading me into the service corridor and returning alone with my phone. Vanessa quickly traced the electronic keycard logs to the storage room and rushed down the hallway with Julian to unlock the heavy door. They unlocked the door to find me unconscious in a pool of blood, my body completely unresponsive to their voices. Julian wept as Vanessa called the emergency services and ordered the resort staff to clear the side entrance. The paramedics arrived in a rush, completely shattering the perfect wedding atmosphere that my mother had worked so hard to protect from embarrassment. At the hospital, the doctors diagnosed a severe placental abruption, which meant my baby was rapidly losing oxygen. I was rushed into emergency surgery while Julian waited in agony, not knowing if he would lose his wife and child. Fortunately, the medical team delivered our daughter, Violet, and managed to stop my internal bleeding just in time to save us both. When I finally woke up, my family stood around my bed, displaying no genuine concern for my survival or my daughter. Vivian pleaded with me to keep the police out of this, claiming it was just a bad decision under pressure. Julian stepped forward and revealed that Vanessa had already handed over all the security footage and lock logs to the local authorities. My mother turned pale, while my father pleaded for family unity and Serena claimed she had no idea I was locked inside. I looked at their cold, selfish faces and realized they had always valued appearances over my life. I demanded that the nurse remove them from my room immediately, choosing to cut them out of my existence forever. The next day, Julian wheeled me to the neonatal unit, where I saw tiny Violet hooked up to breathing monitors. Touching her small, fragile hand, I knew I could no longer remain the silent, accommodating daughter. For the sake of my daughter, I had to hold my mother accountable and ensure she faced the legal consequences of her actions. I gave a full statement to the investigators, detailing how Vivian had trapped me and stolen my only means of communication. The evidence was undeniable, and the police even uncovered text messages from Serena begging Vivian to keep me away from the ceremony. My sister tried to apologize over the phone, but I refused to listen to her selfish excuses. My father Gregory visited me to beg for mercy, warning me that Vivian could face actual prison time. I told him that his passive silence made him just as guilty as her, and I refused to read the letter my mother had sent. Vivian ultimately accepted a guilty plea for unlawful restraint, receiving a sentence that included a strict protective no-contact order. Serena remained married, but the shadow of that horrific day completely ruined her memories of the wedding, just as she had feared. Our family collapsed under the weight of the truth, and I maintained a strict distance from all of them. I had to prioritize my physical and emotional healing over their desire for artificial harmony and false peace. It took months of intense trauma therapy to overcome the severe fear of closed doors and silent rooms. Julian stood by my side through every difficult night, proving what real love and protection actually looked like. Our beautiful daughter Violet grew stronger each day, showing no lasting neurological injuries from the delay in her birth and the oxygen deprivation. One evening, as I held Violet close to my chest, I looked at the lock on my front door and smiled. I locked the door myself, knowing that this simple act was now a symbol of safety rather than captivity. I finally understood that protecting my peace and my child was worth losing a family that never truly cared about me.